Ladies and gentlemen, we have a question for you today, and that is, what happens when the EFF goes right wing? The famously hard left wing party has recently done a few things that have left us rather confused. I suppose we shouldn't really be confused because the EFF's ideology is, well, confused and very contradictory. So recently we've seen in the press that the EFF obviously demonstrated against illegal land occupations, which obviously was on tribal land, and so they wanted to score a few points. But now this latest report has come out that the Pan-Africanist open all the borders, allow anybody into the country party, also known as the EFF, is actually the most xenophobic party in South Africa. Joining me to talk about this is Ramon. Hello, Ramon.
Yes, hello everyone. Sorry if I look like death. I do feel like it. But anyway, the irony of all ironies is that based on the survey, EFF supporters are the most xenophobic and most mistrustful of other African immigrants. Which really begs the question, since we well know that the EFF is like Pan-African and they don't want borders anywhere, and Wakanda will be built once all the colonial borders have been, stripped of its colonial power. Why on earth is the EFF even doing this? Because surely they would know that their supporters don't like this idea of Pan-Africanism, and their supporters don't like other black immigrants. Which really begs the question, why is the EFF pursuing a losing strategy? Even its own supporters don't trust the strategy. It doesn't really make sense.
No, it doesn't. But if you look at actual EFF policy, there's always questions that even I myself have. Why is it that so many capitalists, certain business owners tend to support the EFF? We know that in the Gauteng province, the actual parties, should we say the individuals that support the EFF the most, are actually those that want to be business owners. Like, that's really weird. Like, business owners who are basically capitalists, who want to be able to have the fruits of their hard labor, basically supporting a commie socialist party that don't want them to be capitalists and business owners. Yeah? It's really bizarre, man. So you can see that what this ultimately shows you is that EFF supporters are not always 100% certain as to what the EFF actually stands for. I think the one thing that we can say that the EFF stands for, which we've all obviously seen, certainly we see it on places like Twitter, is that a lot of black individuals see the EFF as basically being a black nationalist party. They see it as being a party that takes pride in black nationalism. But the problem is that black nationalism quite often is limited to nationalism in the country of South Africa. So what happens when this black nationalism becomes global, when it becomes African nationalism, the idea of Pan-Africanism? The problem inevitably comes in that there is a accepted understanding in South Africa that South Africa has too many African immigrants from failed states, such as Zimbabwe. And a lot of individuals see these people coming here and they took our job, those ones. The problem then becomes in that when those individuals cannot take the jobs because they're not here legally, they resort to crime, which gives us a double-edged problem. The first is that we have them taking jobs and increasing the unemployment rate. The second is that they increase the crime rate and reduce the quality of life. The third most pressing thing is that they take too much demand against government infrastructure, such as the hospitals. And so we have heard it being said many times about how government hospitals are overrun because they have too many immigrants taking those services. This does not leave the average black nationalist in this country feeling fulfilled with the promises of the EFF. So one would then have to ask the question, why does the EFF continue to support their policy line?
And your guess is as good as mine. So the real question of the video is, what if the EFF becomes right wing? Just hear us out. I know it sounds ridiculous, but just hear us out. Imagine you had Julius Malema's rhetoric and strategy and intellect mixed with proper South African first nationalism. He can basically be the black Gayton Mackenzie. Because based on this survey, on the distrust of African immigrants, based on a variety of other things, I don't see why he's hanging on to the failed Leninism, Marxism thing, knowing full well it's not going to get him any votes. Byron and I talk about this very often. We argue about how many votes the EFF will get next year. I think it's around 8. Byron thinks
I
it's
think it's
around
about
6.
6.
And that's a huge decline from 10.5 from a few years ago. The EFF message hasn't changed in 10 years. It's obviously
No.
not working.
But I'll tell you what has changed, the EFF's understanding that not everybody abides by their messaging. So recently it was obviously said that Julius himself said, you will not touch Putin, even if Putin is not a commie. We will still stand with him for what they did in South Africa. He even admits that his buddy old Putin is not a fan of socialism and commie type rhetoric anymore. So that must lead you to asking the inevitable question, how long will it be until Juju abandons the Marxist rhetoric himself? And if he does do that, what does that do to his electoral support? What does that do to his electoral opportunities? And we've often said it amongst ourselves and even on the show. Imagine a Julius Malema who's actually on the right. And I don't just mean the right wing, I mean the right side of history. Not the socialist bullcrap that's been tried since the 1946 and it's never worked. I mean proper, good, hardcore opportunities, job opportunities, freedoms, balls to the wall, black nationalism, nationalism as a whole that looks after South African first, doesn't take the race baiting and just looks after the country. Imagine what we could achieve.
I'm sure he'll be close to the most popular politician in this entire country, bar none. Bar none. But he's leaving that space wide open for Gates McKenzie to take over and for a variety of other smaller conservative parties to take over as well. But then again, if you look at the great people of history, especially of the 20th century, a lot of them were hardcore Marxists until they turned. Like Deng in China, who introduced sort of private land ownership. Hardcore Communist Party member, he had to change. Lee Kuan Yew, Marxist when he was young. General Park in South Korea was also Marxist when he was young. And there's a variety of people in these inflection points in the 20th century that were Marxist, avowedly Marxist, and they made that turn at the right moment. And their countries are far better for it. Does Juju have the temerity, the charity, the intelligence for that? Not for now.
Well, at the moment, he's still young. And so, as we've all heard it being said, when you're young, you obviously have a heart. So you choose socialism. When you're old, you have a brain. So you choose capitalism. Everybody with a brain understands socialism doesn't work. And at the moment, Juju's still young and he still has a lot of idealism in him. He's living the good life. He's doing all the things that he wants to do. He gets his votes. He gets his supporters. All he's going to do is go shut his mouth off a couple of hours a day and off he goes. Right? But that's inevitably has to decline. The man's going to get older. He has a family. He has a wife. And so how long until the brain part of his mind kind of kicks in, the brain elements, and he realizes that his policies are failed and have no chance of success? I don't see it as being incredibly long, but it's just really about how pig-headed and stubborn he feels towards it. With that being said, if the man were to take an actual leave from experience and change his mind, he would unlock an inevitable, how shall we say, an avalanche of support from people that in the past would have been very anti him, but would now find themselves more aligned with the rhetoric that he gives. Now, for me, if Malema really wants to become president one day, this is the strategy he needs to adopt.
No, very much so. Very much so. He knows full well that the socialism is just a sort of LARPing exercise. No one cares about it in South Africa. South Africans are conservative. South Africans are Christian. South Africans are pragmatic, centrist people who won't care about jobs and safety and educating their kids and things like that. You know, this vanguard of the revolution rhetoric and the whites did this. No one cares anymore. Everyone knows that it's bullshit. Let's see how long it takes for him to grow up. Who knows?
And let's face it, every time somebody now says, we know what we need centralist control, we need to give the government more power, who goes, yeah, that's a good idea? Like, no one, mate. Everybody understands the cause of all the problems in this country is the government. All of them. Mate, people then go, oh, yeah, but at least the government pays their social grants. But they don't, mate. They even default on that. They even don't want to pay those. The system's down 90% of the time. So nobody's looking at the government going, I know who's going to fix our problems. It's the government. Like, no one, mate. So this idea of central command and government having the overall say, like, It's 2023, man. It's time to grow up. Like, we all know that this isn't a reality.
Yeah, but importantly, Julius is not going to drop it because he doesn't believe it. He's going to drop it because it doesn't give him any support. And I think he can easily
100%.
switch to right-wing populism and be in competition with the
100%.
PA. That makes the most sense.
100%.
What do you give it? I give it, well, I think maybe 2029. They could become
2029.
more right-wing.
2029, when he realizes that electoral support continues to decline, because at the moment he's hanging on to the electoral support of the ANC. He's hanging on to the idea that people don't want to vote for them, but they kind of want the old ANC back. So let's vote for the EFF. Maybe we'll get kind of the ANC light, maybe. But the problem is that, as the ANC is finding, as you allow the commies to talk more, as Kasati say more, as the SSCP talk more, the public shrink away and they're like, you know what? We don't really want commies in charge. Huh? That's why the alliance was never led by the SSCP or Kasatu in the first place. It was always led by the ANC as the front leader. Those other parties leached off the ANCs. They were leeches. They were there because they knew that if they stood on their own and went for electoral support, they'd never succeed. They probably wouldn't even get 2% of the vote, because South Africans as a whole don't want commies in charge. We understand that inevitably. So, at what point in time and I understand Juju can't just change it overnight, because you'll be like, I might lose the little support I have. That's a drastic policy change. So I think it's going to take a couple of years. He's going to get a few election defeats. He's going to see his support decline. He's going to have to reinvent himself. And when he reinvents himself, I think the writing's on the wall where that goes.
Indeed. And Julius can join the No Enemies to the Right club. Won't that be a great day in South African history? Thank you for watching, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. By the way, we dropped our Oranje video yesterday. It is linked at the end of this one. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.